Here we go. I just want to welcome everyone to today's town hall. This is the second edition of our Your Story, Our Science series presented by ALS TDI and Her ALS Stories. And today we are going to be talking about what are the lesser known symptoms of ALS. And first off, I just want to thank our sponsors, Cytokinetics, Biogen, Mitsubishi Tanabe Pharma of America, InSource Services, Novartis, Unicure, Ionis Pharmaceuticals, Regeneron, and Eledon Pharmaceuticals for making this possible today. Um, you just heard from Carol Hamilton, our Senior Vice President of Development, and I am John Gang, our Senior Manager of Science and Brand Communications at ALS TDI. And just a quick agenda, we are going to run through a really fast introduction to ALS TDI and her ALS story and who we are and what we do. And then we will get to the main event. We are going to hear some personal stories about ALS symptoms from Her ALS Story members and an overview of research led by some of our scientists from ALS TDI. And then, time allowing, we will open things up to your questions for a town hall discussion. So, it's that quick intro to ALS TDI. At ALS TDI, our mission is to discover and develop treatments for everyone with ALS. ALS TDI was the first ever nonprofit biotech in ALS, and we were founded in 1999 by the family of Stephen Haywood. You can see Stephen in the picture down there to the left in the orange shirt. He was diagnosed with ALS at the age of 29, and when his family found out there were no treatments available for him, they founded this organization to change that. And they are there in their first office in the basement of their Newton, Massachusetts home. And about 26 years later, we are the most comprehensive drug discovery lab in the world focused solely on ALS with a state-of-the-art laboratory in Watertown, Massachusetts. We put 87 cents of every dollar we raise into finding effective treatments for and cures for ALS. And sadly, Stephen passed away in 2006, but you can see down there in the photo on the right, that is his son and some other members of his family in the lab with our scientists, so that family spirit is still a central part of everything we do. And at ALSCI, our mission is to serve as the drug discovery engine for ALS. And what that means is that we know it will take many treatments to end ALS because ALS is likely many different diseases. So we do the rigorous research to fill the ALS clinical pipeline. This means we work to discover and invent ALS drugs in our labs and then partner with others to help ensure that those drugs advance to trial, unlike a traditional biotech company that might follow a drug through all the various stages of trial and then bring it to market. We go back to the drawing board and keep looking for new drugs, and we will continue to do this over and over again, and we will not stop until everyone with ALS has access to effective treatments. And another key part of our research is the ARC study. And the ARC study is the longest running natural history study in ALS, and it empowers people with ALS all over the world to be partners in ALS research. Anyone with ALS or an asymptomatic gene carrier can participate from anywhere in the world by submitting data, including voice and movement recordings, ALS FRS scores, surveys, blood samples in some cases, but you decide what data to submit, how often, and everything can be shared from home. You also will be given access to your data via a secure online portal, and these data, help power research at ALS TDI, and they are also shared with researchers all over the world to help advance ALS drug discovery. And today, our partner is Her ALS Story. Her ALS Story's mission is to raise awareness that ALS impacts young women who are diagnosed before the age of 35 and provide a community for them to connect, learn from each other, and find support so that they can live their best lives. The primary objectives of Her ALS Story are to create a network for young females living with ALS to lean into, and also to provide a platform for them to advocate together for better treatment options. And today we're going to hear from Caitlin Gonzalez, Ashley Rivera, and Stephanie Cantos about their ALS symptoms. They're all members of Her ALS Story. And then we will also be hearing from Alan Premiseri, our Director of Clinical Research Operations at ALS TDI, and Dr. Danielle Boyce, our Principal Investigator for Real World Evidence. And with that, I will hand things over to Danielle.
Wonderful. Actually, I think Alan is going to kick us off. I'm just going to share my screen. Thank you all so much for coming, and I'm just so excited to share with you what you all told us, what I learned from you. All right. So, Alan, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah. I second what Danielle said. We're really excited for this opportunity to learn and improve our study. Um, this is really a feedback session for us. So if this sounds less like a town hall and more just an interrogation, don't mind that. So just a quick overview of what me and Danielle will be talking about. We'll touch on the ARC study very briefly, but focus on the sort of the surveys that collect symptom information and why we do that. And then we'll be touching on a community survey that we sent over to the Her ALS Story team. And Danielle will be going through some analysis of that information, as well as some other related research on this topic. Go ahead. Cool. So John already mentioned the overview of the ARC study. You can sign up at arc.als.net and find more info there. But I wanted to keep everybody's mind on these aims as we go through the surveys that I have here down in the bottom left. So find new targets relevant to ALS subtypes. That can be genomic markers, proteomic markers, things like that. Develop new models and test potential therapeutics. As we mentioned, we are a lab. We work with cells and we work with mice. So developing new models is part of our job, and being able to test potential therapies in them is a goal we have. And so figuring out information from the ARC study and using that in the lab is part of our workflow. And then to discover or validate biomarkers to monitor progression. This one is very overtly tied to ALS symptoms, but these could be things like neurofilament light in the blood, or digital things like accelerometers through accelerometers or voice tracking. And then in the bottom right are just the 5 major tasks that we ask participants to do in the ARC study. So the ALS functional rating scale, the personal background, which is the surveys, which is what we'll be focusing on, speech tracking, activity tracking through wearable accelerometers, and then remote sample collection to get all of that omics data. And the point to remember here is that while we'll be focusing on one thing, the interplay between all of these things is what's really driving the ARC study and driving our research. It is being able to ask questions like, how does this slope on, in the FRS relate to this presentation of this protein in the blood, right? And then figuring out how to go from there with our research. Um, so surveys are one item that we ask people to do, and we have a whole slew of them. It's a mix of medical, environmental, and some social aspects to it, and I've listed them here. So it'll include things like lifestyle, which can ask about like smoking habits or exercise. Occupation is, where people have worked. Injuries like traumas and head injuries like that. And the point of collecting this information is to get more context on how somebody got to where they are in their ALS progression and really where they're going or what they're currently experiencing. As an example, where we're actually working with Danielle and Pat Dolan on another project evaluating sort of the occupation and geography surveys to see where people have worked and where they've lived over the years and see if there's any sort of environmental risk factors or exposures that might have been a contributor to their ALS, maybe a trigger like we talked about in the last town hall, or something that impacted how their ALS presents today. So the one I'll be focusing on today is the ALS Experience Survey, that first one that listed there. So we can go to the next slide. So we have the survey. It's called the Your ALS Experience Survey. It's completed 4 times, once every 3 months when somebody signs up for ARC. So it'll be when they sign up and complete their first few forms, they'll see a list of surveys, and it will be right there. And it'll automatically trigger every 3 months, but only for the first year. And Daniel, if you click, does the image of the survey pop up? Yes, awesome. So here's a snapshot of it. Sorry if it's a bit small, but I'll just quickly read what's here. So we have, the first few questions are asking if people have had pneumonia, falls that required a hospital visit, blood clots in the arm or leg that also required some sort of medication, and then touching on some of the really major symptoms of ALS. And in this specific version of it, it is prior to the sort of onset of ALS symptoms. When before you're diagnosed, um, before ALS is really even a thought, we ask, did you experience any of these symptoms? So these are really early on. So we have cramps or muscle spasms, difficulty controlling bowels or bladder, difficulty swallowing, problems with speech, and scattered muscle twitching. So we ask if yes or no if they experience these symptoms, and then approximately when, month and year when they experience these symptoms, right? So this is giving us context as to how early potentially their ALS might have started to show signs, even before they knew it was ALS. And then every iteration of the survey after, as you can say on the previous slide,
Sorry.
sorry, no, you're good. Um, every subsequent version of the survey is just asking since the last time you had the survey, have you had any of these symptoms, right? So those are the current symptoms. Right, you're good.
Now?
Yes.
Okay.
You're good. So taking a step back, as a researcher, well, at least for me, I like to ask a lot of questions, right? And then answer those questions to myself. And that's how I sort of tackle my problem solving. And sort of the broadest question to ask about symptoms is do we know about every symptom related to ALS? No. So that's a problem, right? So that's one reason to ask the survey in the first place, is to know more about symptoms. And then does everyone with ALS experience symptoms, all the same symptoms in the same way? And of course, the answer, as we know, is no. And that is one of the biggest challenges of studying ALS, is that it presents differently in everybody at different times, at different rates, at different magnitudes. Um, and we don't know why. And it makes it hard to research, to find targets for, to develop therapeutics for. Um, so as we're constructing a survey, Daniel, you can click to the next thing. All right. I try to ask sort of these questions, at least for symptoms, like what problems am I trying to solve? Were you trying to solve for ALS? And this is just four. There could be many more, but these are the ones that came to my mind first. So how can we identify ALS sooner? Um, Understanding what symptoms are actually related to ALS is important. And if those are presenting early, we want to consider that, eventually it might become ALS. What can we predict about the progression, right? So, is there some sort of presentation of symptoms that occurs in some sort of sequence that will tell us about how somebody's ALS is going to progress? And to do that, we need to know about, the symptoms and when they are possibly occurring. How can we improve quality of life? So even if we can't address the entirety of somebody's ALS, is there a way we can address specific symptoms, right? And we do some of these things. This is not to say we don't do these things, but like, are there other therapies that are not specific to ALS that we can use to improve somebody's quality of life? And in order to do that, we want to, again, know more about what the possible symptoms are. And then lastly, for the clinical research aspect of it, how can we measure if a drug or treatment plan is working? So, of course, we use mainly the ALS functional rating scale as a way to measure response to treatment. But if somebody has a lesser known symptom of ALS, and for whatever reason, the drug that they were had an intervention for maybe does something to affect that one specific symptom, but we didn't attribute it to ALS. Are we losing information there? That could be, while it might not have helped the whole cohort, right? I think you can see how that loss of information is not going to help the field, right, move forward and build on future studies, right? So there's an aspect of this of more, again, like finding markers type of thing, where you want to make sure you're considering all possible ways somebody might improve from ALS or what might respond in somebody's specific ALS. So it's a very big point for clinical research as well. All right, you can go to the next slide, and you can click one more time. So now that I've said all of those things, you can look at this survey and think like, oh, this is a pretty bare bones survey. It doesn't capture a lot of information, how am I going to answer all of those questions with the survey? And that's why we're having this town hall, and I'm hoping to learn more so I can improve it. I am definitely an advocate for improving the ARC study. So if you go to the next slide, Danielle, probably some of these improvements are obvious now that I've said things, but like there are some symptoms that are missing that are even some common symptoms like we don't have foot drop on here, and I think that's a more common symptom these days, or at least people are talking about it more. Life events related to progression. So if somebody needs some sort of specific treatment or medical device associated with a symptom that is not just weakness or some of the usual symptoms related to ALS, we don't capture that information. Um, Allowing for free text entry. Again, some of these symptoms can be hard to describe and might not fit in these buckets, and so we might be losing accuracy. So allowing for people to be able to type exactly what they're experiencing is a way to get at that information. And then continuing the survey beyond the first year. There's a balance between sort of burden and information that is happening here. So we only ask it for the first year, but doesn't not every symptom is going to happen within a year of something, so it could happen very late in disease. Maybe it happens, starts to happen at one point, it goes away, comes back. We don't have that beyond the first year, and that's information lost. And then broadly speaking, for our whole cohort, diversity of respondents is a big issue, I guess, that we need to address because, as is sort of with the general ALS population, the onset and diagnosis of ALS usually happens around ages 55 to 60. And so our symptom surveys are capturing a lot of those symptoms from those people. But we have a cohort of women here who are much younger than that. And so maybe the symptoms that the people in the larger cohort are experiencing are not represented in the smaller cohort. And so we're not accounting for sort of all the possible presentations. And then the lack of participant input on this survey in the first place is another thing to address. The idea is to, at least for me, anybody filling the survey out should be able to feel like they have had their experience captured in a satisfactory manner. If they are feeling like, oh, that's not exactly what it is, I guess I'll put this, that's not exactly the best for, research in the long run. And so ideally, we'd like to have people fill this out and be like, yeah, this captures my ALS journey and my ALS story accurately. And then for us, that makes the research even more valuable. And then I think I'm going to Danielle next. I don't remember the next slide.
I'm trying to go next.
Yeah,
There we go.
cool.
Okay, it's me. So we asked the ARC participants, as Alan said, we analyzed the data from the ARC participants who responded to the survey that he shared. And I should say at the outset, I am Dr. Danielle, but I'm a data doctor, not a medical doctor. And so when I talk about symptoms, I'm not talking about them with any clinical knowledge. I'm really referencing what I learned as an analyst. So I happen to know a good amount about these symptoms, but only in terms of how you report them to me. All right. So this is the question that Alan had mentioned in this Your ALS Experience survey. Before you notice weakness that turned out to be ALS, did you experience? And so here you can see these are really the more common symptoms. And so why we're starting with this is because we want to show you how you answered and the Her ALS Story, I should say, which is a group of younger women with ALS, to kind of see some of the contrasts and similarities between how the general population in ALS and the ARC study, which tends to be older and is not all female, right? Is at least 50% probably Alan male, roughly, right? And so just to kind of understand the differences. So we have a lot of the common, more typical, we would say, symptoms. So blood clot is a smaller percent. Pneumonia that required treatment, that was 6%. Difficulty with controlling bowels or bladder, 8%. Swallowing challenges, 17%. Falls that caused injury significant enough that you were seen by a physician. So we heard a lot of falls. 22%. Speech problems, 28. scattered muscle twitching, 62%, and cramps or muscle spasms, 66%. So this probably wouldn't surprise anyone who's been very involved in the ALS community and discussing this with others. So then, though, I'm always interested in the open-ended questions. So when they say anything else, or do you have other? I want to know. And so one of the things I dug into was a survey that Alan didn't mention, which is conditions. We ask what your conditions are ever, asthma, did you ever have cancer? We also ask your family history, but this isn't directly related to your symptoms in the last 12 months, but just conditions. And so I noticed that a lot of people wrote in what really might be symptoms. And it made me think maybe an area that we can improve our symptoms survey is to just give them a chance to write in specifically symptoms and not as part of, asthma or, different forms of cancer or the like. Okay. So we noticed that a good number, and I didn't fully quantify this, but a good number said restless leg syndrome. And several said Raynaud's phenomena and neuropathic pain. And so we recognize these as early symptoms for some with ALS. So yes, it's a condition, but really what this is maybe more of an indicator of are these early symptoms similar to what we were measuring with blood clot and the twitch, scattered muscle twitching, and so on. So just to think about where else we might find the data and what people are reporting outside of that kind of set of questions. If you only ask people a closed-ended question with 5 or 6 choices, then you're only going to get those 5 or 6 choices, and you're not going to learn anything beyond that. And so that's kind of a lot of the focus of my research is on that. So to this point, we asked the Her ALS Story community, and we had 10 people generously respond. So what you would consider common symptoms have you experienced? I'm not going to read through all of these, but it looks familiar, right? We got a few extras though, right? That we didn't ask about. So even with the common things, right? We found things out that you all felt were common symptoms in the community that we were not asking about. So like Alan said, we had the drop foot, we had fatigue and falling. We did have a fall. We do have fall in our questionnaire, and the difficulty was speech, slurred or nasal speech. I thought that was kind of an interesting distinction. We already asked about swallowing, but we're not about drooling. Interesting, right? Diaphragm weakness. And we also weren't asking about, I don't think, Alan, the pseudobulbar affect, the PBA. Interesting. So, looking back, what were some of your symptoms, and this includes now, but what are some of the things that you're experiencing? So already with 10 people, this is the gold, that we were able to learn and improve with. All right. So then we asked, and of course, what was less common symptoms that your doctor has linked. So what we're trying to get at was what have been recognized, your doctor. Now, not every doctor is going to recognize all the symptoms. Some are going to say that's not related, and some are. But these are the ones that the doctor thought that even though they were less common, they were linked. And so we got a lot of eye and facial issues. The eyelid apraxia. Now, remember, these are women in the Her ALS Story community. And so that's also important to note. Because this is a potentially representing a population that might have a different what we call phenotype or representation of the disease. So that's very important to understand how ALS manifests in different groups. So we're having this eye and facial issue, and the eyes tearing easily. Now, the tearing, hold that thought, because on the next slide that's going to come up again. The eye issues are a big one in this group. And so we had retropulsion, or the tendency to walk or fall backwards, which incidentally has come up in some of the other studies I've worked on in autism and epilepsy too, just in an anecdotal way, but very interesting to me. The extreme weakness, so not just weakness, but just this extreme weakness the doctor felt was linked. Poor balance, finger dexterity, again, fatigue. So it looks like doctors are thinking, well, this is a little less common, but it's definitely related. Overactive gag reflex. and nerve pain and sensory challenges, altered sensations. Cognitive and psychological issues like difficulty finding words and anxiety, excessive yawning. Again, uh, these are things that I don't know why we have that under. That should probably be under neurological excessive yawning. I'm not sure, but those are linked, kind of less common, but linked. And then, very interesting, I saw a lot of skin and scalp problems, which just hypothesizing here, but also thinking back to our last one about autoimmune and other, conditions that are common in this group of ladies makes me wonder if that could be kind of like an exacerbation of those symptoms related to that. So dry scalp, eyebrows, ears, dry ears, skin. So then we asked, do you have any, I'm trying to move this. There we go. Do you have any unexplained symptoms that, oops, sorry. Do you have any unexplained symptoms that your doctor doesn't think are related to ALS or that you haven't reported? So maybe there's something that maybe you think there's something there, but either you haven't discussed it with your doctor, there might be something there. And in here, we found acid tears, uh, so a lot of people reporting that their tears are acidic, and I'm hearing this a lot, and not just here. I'm hearing this a lot, and I'm hearing this from young women a lot. And I don't know that I've heard it from men. That could just be anecdotal, but I'm hearing this a lot. This acidic tears, pinching sensations throughout the body that the doctor doesn't think are related or that you haven't reported. Frequent headaches, sensitivity to light and sound. So it kind of looks like some doctors might take the sensitivity stuff as ALS symptoms, and others maybe not, or maybe they're not reported. Changes in your taste buds. Then we have purple discoloration of feet and hands. And that's, interesting also because another project I've done with mitochondrial disease that came up a lot, purple hands and feet. Permanent bruising on hands in that same category. So this purple bruising. Itchy scalp, again, the skin. So it looks like some doctors do think that it's related, but maybe some don't. But maybe studies like ours aren't reporting those out. Maybe we're not asking and we're not reporting those out, so the doctor doesn't hear about it, so the doctor doesn't know that it's something that, that they should be looking for, and then you don't get treated for it, or, doesn't get prioritized, or we don't study how to manage those symptoms. Shifting teeth. And that's an interesting one. That's going to make me go down a rabbit hole to learn all about shifting teeth and what that might have to do with something. And then we saw some other issues that we're kind of like not sure where to put it. So pernicious anemia. So they felt that that was linked to vitamin B12 deficiency. We had painful intercourse, and this might be particularly reported in this particular population, given the age range and the place in life that folks are, and so important to be able to talk about that and understand it and talk about it with your doctor. Increased earwax. So we had dry ears, and then we have the increased earwax. I don't know if you have ALS and then you have the increased earwax. Like I don't know why that wouldn't be something worth investigating and understanding. What that might have to do with your ALS. And excessive hiccups. Excessive hiccups are reported, and the doctor didn't feel like it's not related, or maybe you didn't report it. And so I'm here to tell you that I think any one of these symptoms from everything I've done in my research career could absolutely be, worth reporting to your doctor and worth reporting to a researcher, and important for us to be collecting and understanding. And so I took all of the symptoms, regardless of which category they fell into, the more common or less common, or whether the doctor appreciated them as symptoms or not, and kind of put them in this word cloud. And the larger the words, the more frequent they appeared. And so, yeah, we did see a lot of the common ones: the weakness, the fatigue, and the speech, right? The drop, meaning drop foot, and muscle issues. But we also saw some other things that I'm not used to seeing on a word cloud. Thanks to Her ALS Story. Scalp was a big word. There's a lot of scalp stuff going on. And again, it makes me think about what could be all like a confounder, what could be related to the scalp issue, but also related to the ALS. And that could be some underlying condition. So this is of interest. This is right here interesting as a researcher. I see the retropulsion. I see the reflex that was under gag reflex. The earwax came up a few times, right? The drooling, that's not one I see a lot as an early symptom. The tearing, the teeth, the eyes, the eyelids, lots of eye stuff too. Again, this was really compelling. And so finally, I just want to share with you, just so you understand that your responses, your narratives are like gold for researchers trying to understand, as Alan said. And I did this study with a group of researchers. We analyzed we had people with ALS describe the challenges they had with filling out the ALS functional rating scale, which is a whole different topic. But as part of this, we asked them about early symptoms. And I published this paper and the data that went with it. And I just want to share that the quotes that I'm about to share with you, that I had a whole data set, all these quotes when they shared about their early symptoms. That was probably as popular as the paper itself with other researchers because everyone wants to better understand this. So your voice is very, very important to us and what's going on. So here's an example of a quote. And I thought it might be useful for you in the conversation to kind of think about how you would describe your early symptoms. Twitching muscles in arms and upper back and neck pain. Weakness in right hand. Thought it was overuse injury from being a musician. I see this a lot where that you're trying to make sense of why you're having these symptoms. So it must be because I'm a musician. It must be because I fell and hurt my leg, and it must be because I have a sore shoulder. All these different things. But we see this a lot. Right foot drop. I told people my flip won't flop. I wasn't familiar with the term foot drop. And the reason why I mentioned that is a lot of times we don't. I don't know that I knew what foot drop was before I started working in ALS, to be honest. And so when we ask, did you have foot drop? Are you going to know that that's how to answer that question? I don't know. Maybe not, right? So just making us think about all different ways that you might want to answer these questions. And that's valuable for us to learn from you. Crying at church. This is the one I thought was a little unusual. So this could be this PBA, but sometimes I smelled a weird odor like fumes that nobody else smelled. And then mild difficulty pronouncing some words like norm. And so now we're going to get to the truly educational part of this town hall where we talk about some individual experiences. And I'm going to introduce Caitlin, Stephanie, and Ashley from Her ALS Story. And first, I think we're going to share Caitlin's video. So let me stop sharing my screen.
I've been diagnosed with ALS for 9 years, as of yesterday, and I've experienced most of the typical symptoms: pseudobulbar affect, fasciculations, twitching, foot drop, muscle cramps, difficulty balancing, increased saliva, and slurred speech, among others. For me, sometimes the nerve pain feels like ants crawling across your skin. Other times it's just a tingly sensation. And then randomly, it can create shooting pain. The neuropathy in my feet has grown to the extent where it produces shocking pain if my bare feet touch the carpet. We've all experienced tightness, muscle spasms, and poor circulation, but the combination creates a whole new experience. My jaw is so tight, and I have little control over my bite. So when I yawn, I become a snapping turtle. My husband, or mom, frequently tries to prevent the chomp because I've already chipped several teeth. My extremities are always cold. I don't actually remember my feet being a color other than blue. But when the temperature drops, my teeth chattering reaches dangerously jarring heights. And even though I'm always stiff, when I'm cold, my body becomes a board. Showering is never easy, but winter mornings I transform into a fish out of water, twitching plank, which makes a difficult process become impossible. Nighttime requires totally different preparation because even though my hands always want to curl and my feet constantly want to flex. During the day, with my custom 450-pound power chair, people can help me position myself to have the least discomfort possible. When I'm sleeping, everything spasms. So I use an array of splints to prevent further degeneration and pain. ALS is a confusing disease because the rapid progression results in continual changes in functionality. So sometimes it's difficult to differentiate between the combination of symptoms and anything else. Like I struggled with gallbladder leakage and stones for months, but my doctors all just assumed the excruciating, debilitating spasms were the natural progression of ALS. It wasn't until my sister forced me to go to the emergency room, which I strenuously argued against since I'd been told by multiple specialists that it was just typical ALS, that fortunately revealed I needed to have my gallbladder removed immediately. That experience really reinforces the benefits of being involved in the amazingly supportive ALS community, because in our chat we've discussed everything from our increased earwax, possibly due to inflammation, to the shocking acid tears, maybe due to increased CO2 levels, to the comorbidity of other autoimmune disorders that so many of us have. In addition to ALS, I have pernicious anemia stemming from a significant B12 deficiency. Interestingly, B12 impacts my energy levels, which are already depleted by ALS. But many of the women in our group are impacted by thyroid disorders, psoriasis, celiac, and a host of other autoimmune issues. One thing that always interests me is how little my doctors focus on pain. Not necessarily pain management, but the origin of our muscle and nerve pain. For example, due to my muscle atrophy, I've developed functional scoliosis, which obviously contributes to my continual discomfort. The chiropractor can help me maintain more of my limited mobility, but there is still significant pain that isn't typically discussed as a symptom of ALS, aside from the recommendation of muscle relaxers. As a psychologist, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the immense emotional toll ALS takes on patients and families. I vividly remember sobbing during an early clinic visit after being told it probably didn't make sense to have children, and in the same breath being offered antidepressants because I seemed abnormally sad. Medication has lots of positive uses, but it's rational to grieve over what ALS takes from us. We can sit in the sadness, mourn for the moments our bodies need to process, and then we have to pick something else to focus on because we've got a lot to do as we work towards a cure. I'll hand the town hall over to Stephanie and Ashley to hear their stories. I can't wait because, to be fair, there seems to be a wide variety in the experience of ALS, which is why it will take all of us working together to find a cure and continue improving quality of life for everyone living with ALS. Thank you for your time today.
All right, so I thought that was just incredible. And so educational for me and validating, I'm sure, for many. Now we'd love to hear from Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I was diagnosed with liver onset ALS in October of 2023. And in terms of symptoms I've experienced, right, obviously I've had significant weakness. I thought it all started, so I did flying trapeze. And I thought it was all coming from my right shoulder because that was bothering me quite a bit. And I thought I might have had a radicular plexus injury or something along those lines. But I feel like it wasn't too long, I think, after I was diagnosed, I started noticing I was having trouble opening my eyelids, right, when I would blink. So I'd kind of blink and then eyelids, it was like they just kind of got stuck there. And that is actually very frustrating. I would also say so when I yawn, and this is something I noticed before I was diagnosed, when I yawn, like my shoulders will kind of shake. I do feel like I yawn, I'm gonna say quite a bit. I'm trying to think. You know what else? Oh gosh, I experienced the retropulsion, which is, I'd say, a little concerning and also kind of scary because honestly, the only way I can stop is either I'm gonna hit something or someone has to grab me. And yeah, I have the dry scalp. Right, my eyes definitely, I feel like water more than they did. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like I wish that people would as they take, I feel like some of those early symptoms, I feel like a little bit more seriously. I remember I went into a neurologist who treats migraines, and I told him I was like, I'm having this really weird cramping, like in like my back or like my stomach when I cough or when I sneeze. And he was like, well, he's like, we can run some blood work. He's like, you can see if you're dehydrated. He's like, good. He's like, honestly, he said, my hands like they can cramp. He's like, if I've been working in the yard for a while, I was like, I feel like this is just a smidge different. But sure. So yeah, that's my story. I'm sorry it was not nearly, I think, as eloquent as Caitlin.
No,
Yes, it was.
yeah, it was. It was. I mean, all these stories are so compelling as a researcher, but also, like I said, I'm sure anyone who's also going through this and hearing themselves in your stories, it's so important.
Well,
And
sorry,
go ahead.
Daniel, can I just interrupt to
Hmm.
apologize a little bit? This disease is so big that we overgeneralize it when we talk about
Hmm.
it. I do.
Hmm.
And I know some of the little things all of you are suffering from along the way, but I didn't know all of them. And I would like to apologize for generalizing, and I would like to thank you for having the guts to F me up into a blubbering mess. Um, you're amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but Ashley, you're screwed now, right after
Yeah.
this.
Ashley, good luck to following that.
Can never be screwed. Our stories are so different that although we all connect, they're so different. Um, so a little bit about myself. My name is Ashley Rivera. I'm 31, but was diagnosed March of 2020. So it was a very interesting pandemic. I come from a very athletic background. So my first symptoms were my right hand cramping, along with left foot drop. And if I could toot my own horn, I took very good care of my shoes. So when I noticed them becoming scuffed at the bottom, I said, oh, we have to go to the doctor. I know that's a little vain, but I knew something was not right. And I knew I wasn't dehydrated because as an athlete, I knew how to replenish my electrolytes. But along with my ALS sisters on the call, I am forever itchy now. I don't have a non-itch day. And with that comes along the acid tears, the cold hands, the cold feet. But one thing that I really noticed early on were much painful periods and menstrual cycles. And one thing I'm really pushing for at clinic is a gynecologist to pay attention to women's health because the uterus is a very powerful muscle. And for a woman who pays very good attention to that part of her body, it wasn't normal. They put me on birth control, wasn't normal after that. It actually got worse. And it took a long time to be taken serious. So not only as a woman, but as a Puerto Rican woman who grew up in the South Bronx, were seen as strong individuals. And don't get me wrong, we are as women, but we should be taken seriously. I know that with the three of us on this call, we each have a poor doctor story where foot drop was called crazy. And then you bring in mental health when we're busy grieving all these different body parts, loss of activity, work, falling, being embarrassed. These are all real things that we deal with that are now exacerbated because of ALS. And I hope that I am being helpful to people on the call and people who get the opportunity to hear a little bit about my story alongside her ALS story. It's sad, it's scary, but I met a lot of good people along the way. So ALS sucks. My symptoms suck. I have burning eyes, but I think these things help a lot. So thank you for having us. Thank you for giving us space to talk. And don't be too hard on yourself. We are all learning as we go along. ALS may be an old disease, but we're still learning so much.
She didn't have any trouble following up. Thanks, Ashley.
You're welcome.
Wow.
I took a bunch of notes, but we have 8 minutes left. This is very helpful for me, but I don't know if we can touch on
Yeah, I'm taking a lot of notes.
it.
I bet you guys. I mean,
Can I comment on a couple of things, I guess?
yeah,
Yeah.
please.
So um, I'm turning into researcher right now. So from Caitlin's story, when people, I assume this happens a lot, when you get diagnosed with ALS, you will hear from the clinician, you may experience more weakness, progressive weakness, fatigue, cramps, the physical symptoms, right? Being able to say you're probably going to, or you may experience severe anxiety, depression, and having those resources for mental health are less common. So that's one thing. We don't capture that, right? And I don't think there's enough research around that. So we need to do that. The inverse of ALS symptoms, so like the not ALS symptoms, also from Caitlin's story about the gallbladder, where they were like, yes, this is definitely associated with ALS. Don't worry about it. If we're missing the information on what is associated with ALS, then the clinicians don't know what isn't associated with ALS. And in her case, it worked out, but that was an issue that is spawned out of lack of information. Then from Stephanie, retropulsion, for people who don't know, I think is a Parkinsonian symptom, right? That has not crossed my plate in ALS. I was not thinking of it as related to ALS. It's a prime example of like trying to not have the bias of like this other disease's symptom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very clearly somebody with ALS has it. And maybe there isn't like a deep tie to the biology or something. Maybe there's some other aspect going on there, but you need to capture that information. Women's health. So Ashley, of course, like no, I have not seen anything on women's health in ALS. It is a big hole as far as this field is concerned, I think. And because of the majority of who has ALS and what ages they develop those symptoms, I think that's probably a contributor to why that is the way it is. But that doesn't help the people who are younger and female and develop ALS, and we have no information for them. I'm sure nobody else would have if you hadn't said anything. And then the last thing was, I like this anecdotal thing that Ashley said. She said forever itchy, which sounds like a very like casual thing to say, but in my mind, I'm like, oh, we don't capture frequency. Like,
Yeah.
how often is she? I can ask her if she's itchy. That means she was itchy, what, like a day, a week, like a month? Like, she said forever itchy. That's like a lot more information than just yes or no, she's itchy, or has an itchy scalp, right? Like, so that
Hmm.
stuff is like what we need to build into our surveys. Anyway, so I'll stop there.
I wanted to let you guys know too that I was just reviewing the, questions and comments that came in as people registered, and most of the symptoms we have talked about, but there was one person who asked, and I'm making the assumption, possibly incorrectly, that it pertained to them. And the question was, does a person's body odor change when they have ALS? So maybe that's something to look at. If anybody wants to pop into the chat, if that is something they've experienced, let us know. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, I'm
Yeah,
more sweaty.
Hmm.
yeah, I would absolutely agree. I also feel like I have a harder time controlling like my body temperature. Like, so I'll just be sitting and all of a sudden I'll get really, really hot and I'll get super sweaty and then it'll go away.
I
Unbelievable.
wonder if you've noticed things that make it difficult to tease out whether it's your medication or a natural or organic symptom of ALS, or is it something that you're taking a supplement or a medication? I wonder if medication side effects kind of mix into all this.
I can personally say I'm not on any
Hmm.
medications related to mental health or ALS,
Hmm.
and I have that. And they'll say I'm basically premenopausal.
Hmm.
And just like Stephanie, and I'm sure Caitlin, the heat, like the how fast you get hot versus like 5 minutes later being super cold. I just think it has to do with the brain communicating to those certain parts and not doing it the right way.
Have any
Yeah,
men who are on here living with ALS experienced a change in body odor or, difficulty regulating body temperature? Feel free to, yes, John Russo, I
I'm
see.
getting some yeses. Most women diagnosed with ALS are older. I said would be interested in yeah. So yeah, um, that's interesting. I thought Jennifer's comment. I'm taking that to mean menopause is always used as the excuse. And does that mean whenever you present with any symptoms like oh it's just menopause, you're hot, it's just menopause, it's cold, is that what you mean? Like it's kind of written
Um,
off.
yeah, in general, I think so. I was a registered nurse for 30 years also. Um, but being in the PALS community, I know that a lot of us as women, in general, you hear that a lot as this generation is speaking out so much more about the perimenopause
Mm.
experience and stuff, is that it is a common complaint for everyone that as soon as you're in our age group, oh, you're forgetful. Oh, it's menopause. Oh, you're this. It's
Mm.
menopause. Oh, that. It's menopause. Um, and I think
Mm-hmm.
once I got into the ALS world, it's even more crucial that that societal habit is not happening. It just can't be the excuse for everything for women in general, but especially for pals, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
with a couple of those girls that my early signs were missed and put under menopause and put on this and let's give you a hysterectomy and you're just tired from, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
those were years that I missed being treated and missed getting the supports I need. And, I think that just gets magnified in the world of PALS.
Hmm. I heard of a woman being dismissed with twitching because she had a low vitamin D. And so they said, well, but a lot of us are, vitamin D deficient, right? But it was for ongoing. It's not anyone in this group, but it was anecdotally told to me because you can have that. You can have those twitching symptoms. So it's not that off base, but the point is kind of wrapped up into problems that women have when they don't eat right or when they don't sleep enough or yeah.
Well, and it's also, I think, a natural human behavior, right?
Hmm.
To make an attribution to something that is solvable. Here, take vitamin.
Hmm.
Here, get a
Exactly.
discectomy. Here, get a
Mhm.
hysterectomy, right?
Yep.
Because God forbid it's something that we don't know enough about yet to help.
Mhm. I think this would be a good use of our electronic health record data in the ARC
Yeah.
too, because we capture just everything. And so, whatever you may have reported to your doctor that they documented in a note, we would have that, and we might have it outside of your neurology visits too. If those, if you pull in the EHR data from your primary care. So this could potentially be a good source of that objective information. You presented to the doctor with something else entirely, complaining of these symptoms, and then they put you on this supplement or something, or said it was just menopause. In the long run, we don't have enough data to really make those kinds of causal inferences, but in the long run, we could probably do something with that as well. Or we could just ask you directly, and then you could answer it, and we could analyze it that way.
We are at 4:02. Is there anyone perhaps living with ALS who's not capable of using the chat that would like to unmute and ask a question or make a comment? Because you're all pretty chatty in the chat, which is awesome.
Now, can we save the chat?
Yes, we will save the chat. So, and I was just going to say that I want to make sure everyone knows that we will make sure we don't miss any of this. We will have the chat. We will come back to us with any questions. Let us know what you thought about this. Let us know what it spurred in your head. Jeepers, I hadn't thought about this. I want to know more about X. We'll try to figure out, how we can learn more about
Mm.
X together. Alan and Danielle, I just think, always admitting that we can be better is critical to getting to where we need to be. So thank you for that transparency. Thank you for taking all of this seriously from everybody. I learned a heck of a lot today. And
Excuse me, Carol, there's a hand raised.
oh, sorry. Yes. Thank you, Michelle. Ligia, is that how you say your name? Feel free to unmute if you have a question, or it might be an inadvertent hand raise.
Mm.
But you can interrupt me.
Okay. I'm ready. Lower hand. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. That's true, I have a hard time typing.
Sure.
I have actually two comments. The first one is I would appreciate if we can have we share. For example, in my case, I hear people saying that they twitch a lot and the muscle spasm and contraction. And for years, I've been commenting, I've said that I take magnesium, 400 milligrams, and they are magical to me. They literally eliminate any twitches and spasm. And every time I speak about this, doctors, they
Uh-oh.
Did we lose her?
I think we may have.
Yeah,
Did you get some of that, Danielle and
Yes,
Alan?
she left in the chat,
Yes.
in the chat feed.
We do have
Yeah, I
a
think she was talking about
medications.
magnesium supplementation.
Yeah.
So one of the surveys we have a supplement. So if we have better symptom capturing survey tied to
Mhm.
supplement taking, if that's where she was going with that, That is,
Yeah.
I think, a good point.
Well, I'm sorry she got cut off.
Yeah,
Jennifer.
we do capture that, and we could connect the two, look at those connections over time. Jennifer
Yeah.
also had a comment.
Yeah.
Well, I just know that I'm sure I'm speaking for many of us pals, but this has been extremely validating for me to get to participate in this one. This was one I was really looking forward to, especially in an area that doesn't have a lot of population, that my journey has been very much. You know, um, to the point where even my ALS clinic with, let's say, that the eyes and, you know, uh, all of that's, it's just you, it's just you. I, I don't know if you'll ever know how important that is for us to be able to hear that ALS is not just turning into a noodle. It hurts. It's this. It's that. It's thank you for trying to change that perspective.
Thank you
Gosh.
for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, that means a lot to me. It makes me want to keep going.
Yeah.
So thank you
If
very
I
much.
if I may continue, I
Sure.
apologize.
Yes,
I
certainly. I'm
Of
glad you
course.
got back.
yeah, I guess I muted myself mistakenly. But you are correct. I was going towards magnesium 400 milligrams. And I swear, if I don't take it for 2 days, twitches come back. I take a dose and they are gone. And my second comment, so actually, sharing what works for us might work and have other patients benefit of my experience. The second comment is related to food. We read so much about how inflammatory food can be if we eat incorrectly. Nobody is addressing that gluten or too much sugar, and we know how much it impacts our lives. What do we know about using food as a form of reducing inflammation, thus helping our body cope with all these reactions and symptoms? Maybe we can help somehow the nerves to slow down or even potentially heal. Do you have any comment or surveys or any information about how food can help? Are there any patients that decided to change their diet one form or another and notice changes? So these are my two comments and suggestions for future conversations. Thank you.
And I
Jennifer,
don't think
Alan,
we
did
can.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm gonna send this over to Alan because I'm sure he's given this a lot of thought as they develop the surveys before my time. But we do ask about supplementation, but I don't think we specifically ask around diet. And
Yeah.
there are surveys. I've worked on the CDC ALS registry, which has overlapping surveys with a lot of the other big studies, and there are questions around diet. I can tell you this. I just happened to have published a paper several years ago at Johns Hopkins on Mediterranean diet versus the Western diet and the influence on inflammation around respiratory diseases like COPD and asthma. And so I have actually done some research around that. Food diary taking is really challenging and detailed. And that my guess is that would be a reason why it wouldn't be captured to reduce the burden on you to really capture an accurate food diary. However, as we went over in the risk factor presentations, oxidative stress and other things are directly related to what you say, like inflammation. And, we know this in diabetes and cancer and other diseases. We know this, and you're absolutely right. So I think that is an important area of research, perhaps not the perfect thing for us to capture with this setting, but definitely something to advocate for. What do you think, Alan?
Yeah. I've thought about the food diary issue in the past. It is a hard thing to capture. There's ways around it, maybe, which is you try to at the sacrifice of a little bit of accuracy. You try to group things, or you try to say like, has your diet changed since you've had ALS, or since, like, just capture the changes in diet, and then you try to give sort of categorizations to diets, like, less a diet with less meat or a diet with more of this or something, just so
Yeah.
you can narrow it down a little bit. That's one way. The other way I think about approaching the problem is trying to do blood tests. So if you can't get all the ingredients of the food, it's going to be hard, but maybe you can just measure levels of something in the blood instead to get a sense of
Mhm.
how your body's actually processing the food you're eating,
Yeah,
like lipidomics or blood sugar and things like
that's
that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thinking about this kind of more broadly, if I had a student who is interested in this, what I would probably suggest is that they go to the database that we used at Hopkins. I mentioned the study I mentioned from Hopkins, which was the Atherosclerosis Risk in Communities Survey. And so there are a lot of big repositories that are actually created for something else. So there's a big cancer database that actually Harvard researchers had discovered. Um, I believe it was formaldehyde as a risk factor in ALS because you collect data from lots and lots of people. Some of them are going to develop ALS, and so even if you're collecting it for one purpose, like atherosclerosis or cancer, you might have a data set there. Kaiser Biobank is another one that we might want to look into because sometimes they do this study in particular did ask detailed food diaries in a clinical setting. So it might be worth looking into if anyone in those data sets actually developed ALS and if we could use, if it was enough people that, that would be telling. So
Uh,
secondary use of other data sets are also very valuable.
I have an idea, if I may. Um,
Sure.
and you can mute me anytime, actually. About the diet, yes, diaries are complicated and tricky, but why not start with a larger brush stroke where send a survey asking how many times a week you eat
Mhm.
um, fried fish or
Yeah.
fried French fries or meat, or have a larger um, and over, I guess, twice a year, send such a survey and start from there where we understand more about the type of food that it is causing or can contribute to some
Hmm.
inflammation. So
Hmm.
that's what my recommendation, broader
Hmm.
strokes.
Yeah, I mean, we could do that and kind of see what we can see from a broad perspective, and see, like I said, the CDC registry asks things about like soda drinking and other things that are broad. I mean, I guess my comment would be would be limited in interpretation, but worth you got to start somewhere, right? And see if there's some impact. Yeah, great. Look, that's a terrific and an actually really important area of research. When I was looking, as I said, in the risk factor survey, it made me this. I had the same thought. Like, are we really looking at the inflammation? If that's a cause, then what causes inflammation? And one of those things is the way that we eat. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ligia.
Um, Jeepers, thanks for asking that question, Peter. Uh, that was very kind. We cry a lot. I swear a
Yeah.
lot. And the rest of us all cry a lot. So as soon as we hang up here, I'm going to do that. And I think there are a bunch of people on this call who sometimes we cry together. We have little signs of like, I don't want to cry alone. And I hope that everyone else on here has that too. I'm grateful to the kindness of the ALS community for that. Um, Danielle and Alan, the question that was in my mind that was also asked in the chat is, how do we get this information out to clinicians?
Well, we publish our findings and we're working
Yeah.
on that now. So that's a big part of it. We ask you, can't publish what we don't know, right? We ask you, you give it to us, we improve, and we get it out there in a variety of settings. And that's another important thing. Dissemination isn't just a journal that a few people read. Some clinicians don't read journals, right? So how do we get it out? We get it out through awareness, through advocacy, through all the activities that you all are engaged in, through Her ALS Story, through TikTok, through all the things that you all are doing. We're all of it's important that we're speaking kind of with this voice. But I think for me the most important thing is talking about it and not just assuming we know everything, because we don't, or just taking for granted that these are the symptoms of ALS and then not exploring them or pushing it and revisiting it. I think that's really important. So all of us getting out there and talking about it, I know that now in my conversations, because people ask me all the time what I do for a living, people from back home, my family, and now it'll not just be those five symptoms, right? Or those, well, you have problems, or you have twitching and you have foot drop. Now I'm going to say, well, but also you'd be surprised, your scalp can itch. You'd be surprised at the other things that can happen, these things that I learned about today. So I think that's really important too, is learning how to change our talking points and just getting out there and talking. I think as an advocate, in my life, I think the most valuable thing I've ever done, it was not going to the FDA, was not going to the NIH. All those things were important, but it was talking to people about the conditions that I care about. Just talking to other people and raising awareness that way. And that's something all of us can do.
Thank you. Oh, jeepers creepers. That was amazing.
Very good.
Her ALS story. Our three presenters, Stephanie, Ashley, Kate, thank you for your generosity and strength in sharing your story. I've been in this world for 20 years and I just learned a ton. So super, super grateful. You'll hear from the development team. Please reach out to any of us if we're not getting to you fast enough. Alan and Danielle have already put their emails in the chat. We mean it. We want to talk to you. So think about what you want to talk about next, and we'll try to make it happen. And thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Appreciate y'all.
Creepers is your idea of swearing. We need to talk.
Yeah.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Peter.
You're very welcome.
Bye, guys. Bye, Don.